Logical fallacies. A logical fallacy is a false argument presented as a truth. Logical fallacies may have the appearance of being valid statements because they sound convincing, but they naturally lack of evidence and occur as a mistaken reasoning. In order to avoid telling fallacies to people and to identify when someone tells them to us, we should be clear on each type of fallacy. Examples of logical fallacies. Circular reasoning. A circular reasoning fallacy is an argument that follows the pattern A is true because B is true, resulting in a redundant statement. This argument presents two ideas that are the same thing without a reasonable basis. This is an example from the debate that ex-President Trump and the current US President Joe Biden held in 2020 election. Biden says on Trump during the debate, "The fact is that everything he is saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar." Basically, what President Biden says is that Trump is a liar because everybody knows he's a liar. This is a redundant statement with no logical arguments nor proofs. Also, he includes the rest of people as conscious about Trump's lies, which is a lie itself. This is an example of circular reasoning fallacy because it is a restated but not a proven argument. Hasty generalization. A hasty generalization fallacy is an argument that rushes to a conclusion about a specific topic before pointing out other possible facts or aspects of that topic. This example is an article from The Guardian about the CEO of Tesla Motors, Elon Musk. The title says, "Elon Musk says college is basically for fun and not for learning." In this article, what Elon Musk says textually is, "I think that college is basically for fun and to prove that you can do chores, but they are not for learning." This is clearly a hasty generalization fallacy because Elon is claiming a statement without deepening on other possible facts. He says that college is not for learning, without considering the experience of people who have gone to college or the knowledge of professors from which students can learn. So, he obviates the real advantages of being educated at a college, for example. It seems to me that he's rushing to a conclusion based maybe on his own experience, but obviating the experience of others when attending to college. He basically underestimates universities with no funding facts. Slippery slope. A slippery slope fallacy is an argument based on the premise that if one event happens, then a sequence of events will happen too as a consequence of the first event. This example is a tweet from a person called Drew Hancock. It had hundreds of commentaries and thousands of retweets and likes, which is why I consider it as an example. The tweet says, "Guys, I figured out how to end the pandemic. Everyone lives like normal, but if you feel sick, just stay home for a couple of days until you get better." Maybe this is an ironic statement, but it is a slippery slope fallacy because it suggests that if you feel sick, no matter if it's COVID, A, it's enough to stay at home because B, you're going to get yourself cured, so you don't need to go to the doctor. For this person, that is basically what will happen. This is clearly an example of a slippery slope fallacy from a tweet that many people seem to believe in the commentaries. Strawman argument. A strawman argument implies the intention of distorting other person's argument in order to debilitate it and make it be seen as an irrelevant point of view. This example is a tweet from Washington Examiner, which is a news portal. This tweet shows the words that Greta Thunberg said about vaccination in high-income countries and attaches the video where she said them. Greta says, "It is completely unethical that high-income countries are now vaccinating young and healthy people if that happens at the expense of people in risk groups in low and middle-income countries. Vaccine nationalism is what's running the vaccine distribution." However, below this tweet, there is a comment from a person who attempts to distort Greta's argument. This comment says, "Grown adults need to stop writing cringe scripts for this little girl to read." This is an example of a strawman fallacy because this person doesn't base his comment on refuting Greta's ideas with a logical argument. He tries to distort Greta's claims by saying that she's not the author of her argument, but rather that argument was written by another person for her to read as a script because she is a little girl without the ability to argue by her own. Ad hominem. An ad hominem fallacy is when a person doesn't refute another person's arguments or points of view, but instead that person offends, insults, or attacks the other person directly. In politics, there are sometimes false accusations between politicians. This is an example from CNBC article. The title says, "Biden believes Putin is a killer. False Russian leader will pay a price for trying to help Trump with the election." This was in March 2021. This article says that when Biden was asked in an interview if he believes Putin is a killer, Biden replied, "I do." And then Biden says that Putin will pay a price for interfering in 2020 US election and for helping Donald Trump. I took all of these President Biden's claims as an example of ad hominem fallacy because they are arguments presented with no proof and are limited to a simple attack and hazard from person to person. False dichotomy. A false dichotomy fallacy is a statement that consists of two possible events without evaluating if there are other options being possible. In other words, this is a black or white argument. This is an example of false dichotomy taken from an Adolf Hitler's thought. We know that Hitler was a genocidal, but even so, I decided to put this thought as an example. It says, "Those who want to live, let them fight. And those who do not want to fight in this world of eternal struggle do not deserve to live." First, this thought is a complete lie. Hitler claims that there is not any other option in the world than fighting. Otherwise, people do not deserve to live. For him, world is a conflicted place and he doesn't think of peace as the ideal alternative for humanity convivence. So, this is a false dichotomy fallacy. Appeal to emotion. An appeal to emotion fallacy is when a person gives an argument based on the manipulation of emotions more than in real facts in order to persuade other people. This is another tweet from a person called Amy about people who are against vaccination. I put it as an example because it had so many likes and comments. The tweet says, "If you don't believe in vaccines and science, don't go to the hospital when you get sick." This is an argument that manipulates the moral of anti-vaccination people. In other words, it argues that people who do not believe in vaccines are not in the right of being assisted at the hospital in case of COVID infection because they don't support vaccination. However, everybody has the right to receive medical care no matter a person's beliefs. This argument attempts to make a certain group of people feel morally wrong. Equivocation. An equivocation fallacy is when a person gives a contradictory or ambiguous argument about a certain topic, resulting in an erroneous reasoning. This is an equivocation example from a New York Times article about the tennis player Novak Djokovic's anti-vaccination stance. This article displays his words textually. He said, "I am not against vaccination of any kind because who am I to speak about vaccines when there are people that have been in the field of medicine and saving lives around the world? I'm sure that there are vaccines that have little side effects that have helped people and helped stop the spread of some infections around the world." But he further contradictorily said, How are we expecting vaccination to solve our problem when this coronavirus is mutating regularly from what I understand? So, the first Djokovic statement is that vaccination has helped people to save their lives and stop the spread of some infections all around the world. But then that statement is contradicted by himself when making that question, insinuating that vaccination cannot do that much against coronavirus mutations, which reflects an illogical reasoning about vaccination efficiency. For that reason, I consider Djokovic's statements as an example of equivocation fallacy because he presented an ambiguous argument with no real basis, so his message is not precisely defined, resulting in a fallacy. Bandwagon appeal. A bandwagon appeal fallacy is when a person makes a statement based on a popular belief with no proof of the veracity of what a group of people think. This example is a tweet from a user called Jim Jordan about 2020 US election. The tweet says, "Over 50 million Americans think this election was stolen. That's more than 1/3 of the electorate. For that reason alone, we owe it to the country to investigate election integrity." This is a false argument based on the premise that if millions of people believe it, then you should believe it because it is true. But it is not a proven statement. This person does not even reveal where he got that number of people who apparently believe that 2020 election was stolen. So he pretends people to believe that idea without presenting any evidence. This is an example of bandwagon appeal fallacy. False analogy. A false analogy fallacy is when a person gives an argument based on an illogical comparison between two unallied things in order to prove a point. This example is a tweet from a person who compares the Titanic event with the current pandemic situation, which are two different types of events that occurred at different eras. So, they shouldn't be compared at all in order to prove a point based on a trivial similarity. This is an example of false analogy.